The middle set in Magic the Gathering's Tarkir block, Fate Reforged, released on January 23, 2015. A small expansion, the set brought with it 185 cards, including 14 reprints, and brings a time-traveling story 1,000 years into the past, before the story shot back to what would be considered present day once again. If you would like to catch up on the story thus far, you should watch our Cons of Tarkir video, which is easily found on Magic Untapped's retrospective playlist. As for the story of Fate Reforged, here's a summary for you. The Dragon Shaman Planeswalker, Sarkhan Vol, finds himself alone on a snowy Timur tundra. So alone that not even the intrusive voice of the spirit dragon, Ugin, could be heard in his head. Furious, the mad planeswalker roars. He's angry and demands answers. He would quickly find his answer by way of the emergence of several young dragons. With their appearance came a realization. Vol was now 1,000 years or so in Tarkir's past. Elated, the dragon shaman quietly thanked Ugin for such an opportunity and followed the brood as they advanced on a Timur encampment, whereupon he was awestruck by their destructive might. He spectated gleefully until he witnessed a giant glowing claw ripping through the sky and through the dragon's flesh. Noticing the spell's wielder, Vol starts down to assist the dragons, only to pull back after remembering Narset's words that Tarkir was truly a much stronger place before the dragons perished. This shaman was evidence of that strength. Instead, after the battle had ended and the dragons repelled, Vol decided to follow this woman who claimed so many dragonic lives. It was a feat of tracking that did not last long, as the woman circles back and attacks him, her saber-toothed cat trapping him and keeping his movements in check. She demands to know why he was following her. Vol responds that he's following the whispers of Ugin and thought that she might be his spirit guide. The woman, Yasova Dragonclaw, tells him he's mad for thinking such a thing, and demands a reason to spare his life. Vol, remembering the name Dragonclaw from Tarkir's history, begs her for his life. Both disgusted and pleased, Yasova spares him on the condition that he not pay her any more disrespect, and permits him to accompany her. As they travel, the pair talk. Through these conversations, she surmises that Vol is not from her Tarkir, but rather a future Tarkir. She pieces together that, in Vol's Tarkir, the dragons have gone extinct, and makes the connection between the death of the dragon, Ugin, and the eventual removal of dragons as a race on her world as a whole. Vol, realizing that he's probably said too much, tries to backtrack, but it's to no avail. Yasova then shares with Vol a vision she has had. A vision of the Timur conquering all of Tarkir, with one of her descendants, the High Khan of all. She further tells him that the voice in her visions bids her to track down the dragon storms and leave a trail that leads to the spirit dragon's lair, and that, in return, the voice's owner would arrive and slay the spirit dragon personally. Like a bolt of lightning, an epiphany strikes Vol. He asks if she knows the owner of the voice in her visions. She replies, stating ironically that it is a dragon. A great dragon, with scales of gold, and an orb that floats between its horns. Vol's blood grows cold. The voice is that of Nicol Bolas. Initially, the dragon shaman fears that his master had followed him into the past. Then, he remembers the past, and how Bolas had slain his brood brother on this very plane. Finally, Vol understands everything. Bolas is on his way to Tarkir to kill Ugin. With a sudden urgency, the dragon shaman shifts into his dragonic form and soars into the sky. A shocked Yasova can only watch from the ground. Using the dragon storms as his guide, Vol glides through the air until he has at last found the storm's eye, Ugin himself. Vol was not the only one arriving, however, as reality briefly rips apart and Nicol Bolas appears. As he hastily approaches, he views the two dragons speak before a fight between the brood brothers commences. Vol is still too far away to assist. Bolas struck a mighty blow against Ugin, but the spirit dragon was able to fend it off. A moment later, the balance of power in the struggle shifts as Yasova arrives to assist Bolas. As the shaman prepares a spell against Ugin, something snaps in Vol's mind. He realizes that he must be the one to kill the spirit dragon. Now close to the fray, Vol sheds his dragonic form. He drops to the ground. Wounded from the descent, but alive, he gets to his feet. He casts a Banefire spell directly at Ugin. The spirit dragon falls. The fight now ended. Vol lurches to where Ugin had landed, only to find a canyon there that was not there before, with the dragon lying at its bottom, dying. Overcome with grief, Vol begs Ugin to tell him what to do, how to make it right. Speaking directly into Vol's mind, Ugin had but one thing to say, that he would always fail, so long as he seeks guidance, rather than seeking the truth. Desperate to save the spirit dragon's life, Vol takes out a fragment of a Hedron that he had taken as a trophy from Zendikar while working for Bolas previously. He activates it, and it begins to unfold. As it does, it begins to cocoon Ugin, preserving him, and thus preventing his demise. In doing this, however, Vol had created a paradox. In this simple, selfless act, he had guaranteed Ugin's survival and, thus, that of Tarkir's dragons, and also making his own existence an impossibility. Sarkhan Vol then vanishes from reality. His actions, however, did not. For generations to come, Vol's deeds would be immortalized by the Temur through the teachings of Yasova Dragonclaw, and become known as the Tale of the Dragon Man, the Sky Khan, who had come to save Ugin. And that does it for the story of Fate Reforged. Well, the storyline, that is. As for the set itself, it proved to be a bit of a challenge for both the designers, a team led by Ken Nagel, and featured the likes of Mark Rosewater, Ethan Flesher, and Gavin Verhey, as well as the development team led by David Humphreys, and employed the talents of a number of folks, including Mark Gottlieb and Matt Tavik.
So Fate Reforged was in a weird place because it represented the past, but it had to work with both a wedge set and an ally dragon set. And like, how do you do that? And so we ended up making use of hybrid mana. It's actually a really interesting use of hybrid mana, where we would make cards that were playable in a 2-color deck, but also playable in a 3-color deck. So that you could play them, they had the color identity of wedges, but they were playable in a 2-color deck, an allied color deck.
But employing hybrid mana was not the only new thing that Fate Reforged brought to the Tarkir block as a whole. As should come as little surprise, the second Tarkir set featured a combination of mechanics from its predecessor, Khans of Tarkir, as well as some that will be in its successor, Dragons of Tarkir.
One of the fun things is we decided that there were going to be 5 mechanics that showed up in Khans of Tarkir, and 5 completely different mechanics that showed up in Dragons of Tarkir, and then Fate Reforged would have some of each, was the idea. So that it represented, you could see how each timeline came from this past. And that was fun, trying to pick what to keep and what to change. And some of the mechanics sort of evolved and were like, referenced the other mechanic. So that was a lot of fun to put together.
Those returning clan-specific mechanics are Prowess for Jeskai, Delve for Sultai, and Ferocious for Temur. As for the 2 new mechanics, Mardu, which had Raid in Khans, now has something called Dash, which is an alternate way to cast creatures that gives them haste, but returns them to your hand at the beginning of that turn's end step. Abzan was given the Bolster mechanic, replacing Outlast. Bolster has players choose a creature with the least toughness among the creatures they control, and put a specific number of +1/+1 counters upon it. Morph, a mechanic that was across all 5 clans in Khans of Tarkir, does not return in Fate Reforged. Instead, the set has a new version of it called Manifest, which puts into play any card as a face-down 2/2 creature that can then be turned face up at any time for its printed mana cost or morph cost if it has one. The set also has a handful of cards with anchor words that allow players to choose as to how they want the card to work. These choices are cons and dragons, thematically providing players with a flavor choice between siding with Tarkir's clans or the dragons. In fact, there was a cycle of enchantments at Rare that did exactly that in the Siege cycle, which is one of 12 cycles found within the set. Of the rest, cycles worth noting include hybrid mana ability creatures, which are mono-colored creatures with wedge-colored hybrid mana costed abilities. Cons, which, this time around, are mono-colored legendary creatures that have a wedge-colored hybrid mana costed ability. Mono-colored dragons, which are 4/4 creatures with flying that each have an additional in-color ability. Rune marks, which are creature enchantments that give +2/+2, as well as an additional boon so long as you control a wedge-colored permanent. And allied-colored legendary dragons, each of which have an ability that triggers whenever a dragon you control attacks. The 10 life gain dual lands from cons also appears in this set, though with different art to reflect the time change. The fetch lands from cons also appear in Fate Reforged booster packs, though with the Cons of Tarkir set symbol on them rather than the Fate Reforged symbol, and are thus not technically considered reprints, but rather an extra run of those cards to make them still obtainable for sealed and drafting purposes. Outside of the cycles, Fate Reforged featured a number of strong and popular cards, including Crux of Fate, which saw a lot of play in Standard at the time, as well as still occasionally in Commander today. The card made headlines yet again a few years ago in its Strixhaven Mystical Archive reprinting due to an art plagiarism scandal between the card artist, Jason Felix, and indie artist, Kit LaPena, with the former seemingly copying the fan art of the latter in his illustration. Guramog Angler, a staple card in a number of formats thanks to its delve ability. Monastery Mentor, a very strong creature that saw play in Standard, Modern, Legacy, and Vintage in control decks. In August of 2017, it was banned in Vintage. Temur Sabertooth, a card that is heavily played still in Commander, that can not only protect creatures, but also enable a number of combos. Tazagur, the Golden Fang, which, thanks to Delve, found a home in several formats. Temporal Trespass, a free turn spell that can be cast for as little as 3 blue mana, thanks to Delve. Temur Battle Rage, an uncommon that saw heavy play in red-green aggro decks during its time, as well as in Death Shadow decks in Modern. Ugin the Spirit Dragon, the second colorless planeswalker ever in Magic the Gathering. It became a powerful finisher in Modern Tron decks. Upon being reprinted in Core Set 2021, it proved even more powerful and was soon banned on Magic the Gathering Arena in the online game's historic Brawl format. Warden of the First Tree, a card that was inspired by the Eventide card Figure of Destiny. And Alicia, who smiles at death, a legendary creature that represents not just a named character in the Mardu Horde's history on Tarkir, but also the first canonically trans character in Magic the Gathering history.
We did something really nice where the author of the story himself has a trans daughter, and so had some lived experience and was able to write a really nice story. Alicia's become a very popular character. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we this is true for all of Magic, but it's definitely true in Cons of Tarkir, is we like to show the diversity of life, of people, of the earth. And so we definitely do sets where we more point in a certain direction. Cons of Tarkir definitely is looking at Asia, there's a lot of influence. But wherever we can with different characters, we like to have as much diversity as we can.
Of course, there are a handful more cards with a mention by means of the set's various promotional offerings, and that includes Sandstep Mastodon, the set's launch promo. The set's game day promo, a full art Mardu Shadow Spear, along with a full art Supplant form that was given to game day top 8 finishers, and Shamanic Revelation, the set's buy a box promo. And like cons before it, each of the set's factions had a variety of pre-release promos that could be had, depending on which faction-themed pre-release kit a player used during the event. But those were not the only promo cards that were available during the pre-release, as there was also a sub-event that took place at that time known as Ugin's Fate, in which players could complete achievements. Upon completion, players would be given a Ugin's Fate promo pack that contains 2 alternate art cards that show how Tarkir had changed in this new, upcoming timeline, as well as a manifest token and one of 10 promo-exclusive Fate Reforged basic lands. It was a bit of extra hype for a set that was already riding high off the waves put forth from its predecessor. It's something that Magic's head designer does not take for granted, and is pleased still today with how things were received and ultimately executed.
Fate Reforged, in my mind, was this giant puzzle we had to solve. We really liked the idea. I mean, I was very enamored with the idea that the small set worked with both big sets. But once we came up with the story, we had to come up with the mechanics. And Dave Humphries, Ken Nagel did the design, handed off to Dave Humphries, who did the development. And they really found a lot of solutions to a really challenging problem of how to make a set that really went to 2 different timelines that were very different sets.
So, is Fate Reforged amongst your favorite Magic the Gathering sets? Love it or hate it? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section here on YouTube. And please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Magic the Gathering content. Also, we have a tip jar on Patreon if you're feeling so generous. Thank you so very much for watching.